Good afternoon. So this is going to be a brief lesson in watercolor. And here under the camera is what you're going to need. You're going to need a container half full of water, paper towel, brushes, there are different sizes. You'll need watercolor paper, which is 140 pounds and very stiff, like a piece of cardboard. And you're going to need water-based Crayola markers. Now, this technique only works on special paper, and the paper I use is this brand, this company, and this type, XL watercolor paper. So if you'd ever want to buy this online, it's not expensive. You could afford it. It's about $7 for a pad of paper like that. So let's get started. You can see right here in this panel, I've already added some color using colored pencil and some surface design using a thin Sharpie marker. Now I could leave that alone and not mess with it at all, or I could paint on top of it. But let me show you how to paint the panel right next to it. I'm going to go ahead and take a Crayola marker, uncap it, and examine the tip. I can see the tip has a point on it. It looks fairly clean. I think it's probably halfway decent. And I'm right-handed, so when I come in, I'm going to come in from my right. So here I am coming in from my right, and I want to place the color right here, and using the side of the marker to get a nice broad sweep. And again, to be sure I have plenty of pigment on the page. And if I find a small area that needs a tiny amount of color, I can use just the tip of the marker to add that color. Now I'm going to cap the marker with the snap and put it back down and pick up this brush, which is a number 8, one of my favorites. You can see the number 8 printed on the handle. Now I'm going to check this brush out to make sure it's in good working order. When I pull the brush out of the container, I pull it against the lip to see that the brush holds a point. That's a good brush. I can also pull it against the towel and examine the tip and see that it holds a point. That's a good brush. You have to have a point on your brush the same reason or the same way that you have to have a point on your pencil. It's all about control. If the bristles, the individual hairs of the brush, don't hold together in a point, do not use that brush. So here I go, loading and unloading the brush, loading and unloading. You have to control the amount of water in the brush by pulling against the lip or pulling against the towel. Pulling, not pushing. Going in here from the right, so I can see the tip and where it's going, I'm going to redissolve that water-based marker and pull it back. And in pulling it back, you can see that I get a very nice range of orange, from a darker orange to a lighter. I'm going to turn the paper so now I can see where the brush tip is going here, right against that dark edge, and here, right against that dark edge. So you may have to turn the paper in order for you to position your brush exactly the way you want it. You notice I didn't brush back and forth, because if you did that, it would eventually wear out the paper surface and you'd get a kind of a messy look. I'm going to wash out that orange and dry the brush, and I think I'm going to turn the paper now upside down and come into this area. I want to avoid the wet area because I'm afraid that if I put wet next to wet, they'll bleed together. So let's move over here out of the way. Here is my dark blue. Here is my dark blue. And I might add something else to that. Let's add this red violet. Here comes red violet. You notice I turn the paper so it's easier for me to control placement. Snap the cap when you're done. Same number 8 brush, loading, unloading, loading, unloading, adjusting the amount of water for the area that you're painting. Not too much and not too little. Coming in from my right, I can see the placement of my brush, dissolving that blue, pulling it back. As I connect to this red violet, it will dissolve and mix with my blue. And I think I'll stop right there. If I continue to work that surface, the colors might look muddy, not nearly as fresh as they do right now. Is it a favorite of mine? Not really, but it's worth experimenting. Wash the brush again, put it down. So you can see how you can go from panel to panel in order to paint each one differently if you'd like. Now this panel is still a little bit wet, but this one right here has had a long time to dry. So if I wanted to go back on top of this panel, the dry panel, I could. And here you see me adding a line design using a silver metallic marker on top of my dry paper. I can turn the paper so I can go this way. So your pumpkin can be very decorative and have a lot of color and a lot of pattern that you wouldn't normally expect to find in nature. That's okay. In your final for this pop-up assignment, you're going to need 2 large pumpkins and another third detail that complements the pumpkin. Complement means to complete, so you wouldn't want another pumpkin. You'd want something else that helps to contrast with and provide the viewer some additional detail that the pumpkins themselves don't provide. For example, some bats. So later on, I'll probably create some watercolor of some bats, or maybe a ghost, or maybe some tombstones, or maybe a tree, an old dead tree, to go along with these elements. So remember, point on the brush, control the water in the brush using the lip of the towel, always a point. Never spend too much time in any one area, otherwise it will look dirty. And you can always use colored marker or pencil on top of your dry watercolors, or you can even put colored pencil and marker down and watercolor on top of it. Let's go ahead and add a little yellow to the top of this. I wouldn't even have to watercolor that. And there's the yellow on top of my green and my black design. All right, now you try.